it gone?
Oh, the way up there, look.
Hi. One of the things that I do with Scouts is build model rockets, and the reason why we do that is because there is an astronautics badge within Scouts, and part of that astronautics badge is about building rockets. I think it's also a relatively easy way to show how some of the skills like knots and so on, and model building and all of this kind of stuff that's part and parcel of Scouting fits together to make something that actually is functional. I wouldn't necessarily say a model rocket is practical, but it's certainly functional, and at the end of the build process the Scouts, that is, can go and launch the rockets and have a good time watching them go up into the sky, and it's all very exciting and lots of fire and all of that kind of stuff. So it's a good little activity to do. It's not necessarily the cheapest activity to do, but yeah, if you divide the cost out per head, comes to, I don't know, somewhere between £8 to £10 per head in English money. The rockets that I use at the moment, this is where this £10 stuff come in. There is a Klima set that gives you 10 reasonable rockets for about 75-76 quid. And it comes. They come in a box that gives you everything that you need to do, other than glue and scissors and so on. There are also other ones. So SDs do Educator's Pack that gives you a few more rockets, like 12 rockets or something, for anywhere between £80 to £110 or something like that. You're looking for starter kits. You can get pre-made rockets, but they are more expensive, and I don't think teach Scouts or young people or whatever as much as it would if you actually get them, sit them down, and build the rockets themselves, show how everything goes together, and explain a little on the way about what's going on. So the instructions I've done this a few times with the Scouts, and it always is a bit of a not quite understanding how the instructions work. That's largely because I think the instruction language is natively German, and the English instructions that you get with them are a translation from the German, and potentially not as clear as they otherwise might be. However, last time I ran it, I was called over to, or last time we ran it as a troop, I was called away to do some of my away from group responsibilities within the district, and so had to pass those rocket building teaching skills or whatever on to one of the other leaders within the group, and that was somewhat. Well, I mean, sometimes you find things that are easy, and you don't quite understand why other people don't necessarily find them easy, and it's not until you try and pass those skills on and you look at the blank looks in their eyes when you're trying to explain things to them as to why things that you find easy are not necessarily easy for everyone else. And part of that is in the translation, or the translation of the English instructions that comes with the Klima rockets into actual practical use of them, shall we say. So I thought what I'll do is I'll do a video that then can stand for posterity, so if I do need to go and teach Scout leaders how to build these things in the future, I can just say, well, watch this video, hopefully that will teach you in a more visual way. And it also might help other people out there that want to get into model rockets, give it a try, in a relatively inexpensive way, or do it with a group of young people, or what have you. 10 rockets should actually do you quite proud. If you've got, instead of having individual rockets, if you put people into groups and have maybe 3 or 4 to a group, then dividing the tasks up to build the rocket, you can get it all done in an evening, and it's quite good. Right, so let me show you what comes with a Klima. So you get 10 sets of everything that you need, and I'll show you the sort of rough things. You get a cardboard tube, which is a fuselage. And one of the nice things about these rockets is they come completely undecorated, just a white blank canvas and things. So what they can do is colour them in their own designs, felt tips, whatever. The best ones that work are actually the Sharpie coloured felt tips, permanent marker type things, but you can use any felt tips really. We got a load of cheap ones this time around, a cheap set of felt tips, and they did perfectly fine as well. So that's the main fuselage. You also get a polystyrene chunk. That bit is used for the fins of the rocket. You get a cardboard tube, another cardboard tube. That tube holds the motor. We won't just be on about assembling the rocket this time rather than motors. We're going to the motors at another point, but essentially that tube is where the rocket motor goes when you actually fly it. You get a handful of O-rings. This is per rocket, so a couple of larger ones and one small one. You get a bit of Kevlar string. You get a bit of elastic string, or shock cord, or whatever you want to call it. You get a nose cone. You get some nutty bits of cotton and a parachute. I've passed. I'll come to this when we get to actually messing around with the parachute, but I've kind of started assembling that parachute already, but I'll show you the gist of it when we get there. You get a clip, metal clip, and you get a plastic tube, small plastic tube, of which need to go and fetch. Right, but before we go and fetch, you also get a template like so. Now, this template has got a number of different fin patterns and a number of different they're marker collars. I'll show you how those are used in a bit. Okay, I'm just going to fetch that missing bit of tube, so I've got everything that I need to continue. Alright, so plastic tube, that's the only bit I was missing from that, and also I brought out an undone parachute, if you like. This is how you receive the parachute in the set, but you'll see it doesn't really make many odds on that. You also get some wadding material, but I'll explain that when we get there, and some eyelets, the reinforcement eyelets that you get in punching when you hole punch things, but that's useful for when we come to the parachute side of things. Right, so in addition to all of the stuff that you are provided, you will need a craft knife of some description. You'll need scissors. What type of scissors is up to you. They just need to be able to cut really around the parachute. Everything else you just use a knife. Some glue. Now I prefer using this stuff. This kind of stuff also works really well with them. The instructions talk about white glue a lot. don't necessarily. If you're doing it in an evening, you want something that dries really quickly, and both of those dry really quickly and do the job. The obvious safety factor with this Gorilla Glue, super glue, you need to give a little bit of a pep talk to, if you're doing it with young people, pep talk at the beginning to say, please don't get it anywhere near your face or glue yourselves to the desks or what have you. Right. So the first job, some of the instructions as we go, particularly when it comes to some of the knots. In a lot of cases, the instructions are calling for overhand knots and multiple overhand knots and double knots and all of this. I think there are better ways, and especially if you're a scout leader, there are much better ways of managing the knot side of things, and I will show you my preferred knots instead of the multiple overhand knots that they talk about. Okay, so we'll put all of this stuff aside for now. What we are going to be doing is we are going to be working on the housing for the motor, which you'll need that tube, 2 of those, the clip, an O-ring, the shock cord, the yellow non-bendy shock cord, right? Okay, and a knife and some glue. Alright, so just to explain what all of this is about, these rings here fit snugly into the diameter of into the whatever of your rocket, so they fit into there. This holds standard motor sizes that you can get, either Klima or Estes type motors. So in order to get the diameter of that fitting nicely and centrally into the diameter of that, you need these to get it centralized. That's kind of what's going on there. The Estes, particularly the smaller starter set Estes rockets, are already that sort of size, so you know they don't necessarily have all of this paraphernalia going on. So just to explain, so that's those bits explained. That houses the rocket motor. These two give you this sort of centralizing into the center of the tube of the rocket fuselage. This O-ring fits inside there, inside that, and it is against that your rocket motor pushes in order to give your rocket thrust when you launch it. So the motor will go in one end, and then that will be inside the tube, and the motor will push up against that, right? So when the motor, your fiery bit at the end, is causing things to push, then it will push against that ring and cause the whole thing to lift off. If, when you're assembling this bit of the rocket, if this bit is not glued in tightly and snug inside this tube, then what will happen is when you fire the rocket motor will thrust its way up, push this out, and then travel all the way up the fuselage of the rocket, and you will end up your rocket will stay behind while the motor launches itself into the clear blue yonder. So you don't want that. Yeah, so if anything on all of this, you want to make sure that this bit is secured inside this bit. Okay, so we have clip first. You need a pen for this, and all you do is you stand your bit of your motor housing next to the O-ring, and you just put a bit of a mark on the tube. Then when that mark, where that mark is, little blue spot just there, just want to get the craft knife and just put a little bit of a slot into the tube. You do not want to cut all the way through. All you want to do is to give have a bit of a hole there. Okay, reason for this is this bit, the clip. Now this clip goes alongside the whole thing, and that bit of twisted bit at the end there, don't know if you can see it very clearly on the camera, this bit here at the end there, that just clips into the motor when you put the motor into it, and clips it in so it's all secure and doesn't fall out the bottom of the rocket when you're trying to put the rocket onto the launch pad. So this then goes and slots into that hole there. Alright, so now from this point on we have definitively made which end of the rocket is the top, or which end of the rocket housing is the top, which is this end, and which is the bottom, which is this end, because the motor has to go into this end and clip against that. So now we know which is going to be our top and which is our bottom. Up until this point it doesn't matter. The reason why it does matter is now is that this particular chunk of the motor needs to go into the top here. So you don't want the clip and this on the same end. This needs to go on the opposite end. And the reason why you measure where you're going to cut that slot using this is so that when you put it inside here, it snugly fits down and onto that that bit of the clip. Alright, so we can actually do that now. One of the reasons why I like this particular form of Gorilla Glue is it comes with a brush. So if you undo it all the way, it comes with a brush, and you can kind of just put some glue on using the brush rather than the nozzles, and it makes it a lot cleaner. Okay, so I'm just going to pop that in there. Might take a little bit of widging around. Some of this is quite knacky, but once it's there, it's there. Right, so that's now in. We now have that part of our motor set. So we have clip at the bottom, and we have the O-ring installed at the top, and that's glued in. So once that glue sets, it will be nice and tight in there. The next bits we need to do, we need to put these bits around our bit of motor here. So the bottom one is really easy. All that is going to do is go over the top of the clip. So I'm just going to brush a little bit of glue inside there. I'm going to pop it over there and then just twist it into place so that it is just holding all of that nicely in line. Alright, so that's our first bit. The second bit, this is where things get a little bit knacky, because what you need is this bit of Kevlar needs to fit down the side of this ring. Alright, and this is yeah, can get a little bit knacky, but this is, the instructions will tell you to tie this bit of Kevlar to the elastic shock cord at the start, and I suggest humbly that you don't do that and just deal with the Kevlar on its own. Right, so again the instructions will ask you to go and say do a double overhand knot in the end of one. This is to stop the Kevlar from travelling up through the ring when we put it all together. What I suggest you do instead is a figure of 8 knot. All you really want is a stopper knot at the end of it, and a figure of 8 will do the job probably a bit more efficiently than a double knot. But that's what we've got. Figure of 8 knot in there. Then poke that through there. Slide this down onto your tube, and this is where it gets a bit awkward because you've got to get it over not only the string, but you've got to get it over the clip as well. Done that. That's pretty good. That's what we need to do. Pull that through so that knot is against the ring, and then this is another reason why the brushed glue is useful because it means I can glue this without sliding it off. I'm just going to put a bit of glue around the top and bottom of that, and that will glue all of this bit of the ring in place, and then we will end up with that is the entirety of the motor cartridge done. Okay, so this piece of shock cord that goes and attaches to the elastic shock cord. This is Kevlar. The reason why it's Kevlar is because you don't want it to go and burn so much, and Kevlar is a lot more resistant to burning than the elastic cord. And a rocket motor, it'll have your thrust which come out the bottom, and then there's a second stage to it eventually, so you get a certain amount of thrust, and then the motor will stop thrusting. Then there'll be a fuse that's still burning inside the motor that will eventually put another explosion that will push up through the rocket and pop the nose cone off the top. So there will be a bit of an explosion, fire, whatever, coming up in this direction, so you don't want much in the way of easily burnable string or what have you in the way there. Okay, so that's your basic. That's your start. So you've got your cartridge bit done in which the rocket motor is going to sit. So the next thing you need are your fins, right? So there are lots of different designs of fin, and this is what this template gives you. You've got your, well, there's lots of different types of fin. That's just let's just leave it like that. And these give you the templates for each of the types of fin. Now you can do all sorts of things that you want to do. You can cut them out. You can put them on cards. You can make them a little bit easier to do. Whatever you want is going to get you through the fins side of it a lot better. The important thing is that the straight edge of the fin, I'm going to do this 4-side one here. The important thing is that the straight edge of the fin, which I'll show you once we get to doing this, cutting around this, the straight edge of the fin, which is this one here, which is the bit that's going to attach to the rocket, is actually straight, because if it's not straight it won't fit onto the rocket very well. So that's the goal. Now these numbers in the middle here, you'll see that some of the fins have got 3 times, some of them have got 4 times. This is the design of how many fins of that particular shape are expected for your, so it's a choice. You choose one of those fin shapes, and then you make as many fins as is told, right? So this is a 4x one, so I need to create 4 fins of this particular shape. Right, so I am going to draw around the template. Da, 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 da. Oop. And like I said, the most important one is that initial straight edge, this bit here that is going to connect to the rocket. So you can cut these out in any which way you like. I think the best way to do it is by doing it with a knife, and then you can get those straight edges really nicely and straight. Meaning that we can get them easily glued onto our fuselage when it comes to that. So once you've done that, well, I can do that bottom one as well, all the straight lines. and then you can use scissors to trim off the bits that you don't need, the outside of it, to get your fin shape. A bit conscious about the camera sort of doing weird things, but regardless. Okay, so if I go and break these apart, so all I've got left to do is actually cut round the arches of the fins to get our final fin shaped. You can of course use a knife to go around these if you so wish, but you know, I don't really think it's that necessary, as long as you've got the edge at which they're going to be connected to the rocket nicely straight, then the rest of it is moot. What's nice about this is that it gives the, as well as the personalisation aspect of it, if you get different groups putting different forms of fin on, and there's, you know, there's 3 fins and 2 fins and what have you, then that's great, because then you can get the different teams experimenting with their fin configuration and yeah, doing different things. Right, so we've got 4 fins, so we've got these strips here. So these are for 3, these are for 4. So all I need is one of the 4 fins. Yeah, so different fin configurations, different fin numbers, different different fin shapes and what have you, and then see which ones fly better than other ones. That's a fairly simple thing to do. Right, when we got to that point, we don't need this bit of paper anymore, put that to one side, and we don't need all our rubbishy bits anymore. What we do need to do with this is pop a little bit of glue in the shaded area, not too much, then using our rocket fuselage as a bit of a pro forma, because ultimately that's what it's going to be wrapped around in to give us some indication of what we're doing. Wrap it around that, and just you don't want it stuck to the actual fuselage itself, but you are going to use it as a measuring device for your tube. So using the tube as a bit of a pro forma to do it makes sense. Then we need, this is a good thing about Yoo-Hoo as well, this stuff just doesn't take very long to dry, and as you can see it's now already dry. Okay, so on these little bands you have, at least on the German ones, you have a number of arrows that say Flosse and one that says Leitrohr, right? You want to put when you put this around your tube, you want to put just markers around each one of those, at each one of those arrow points. These tell you where the fins are going to go. Right, they're going to tell you where the fins are going to go, and they're going to tell you if it will go on again. They're going to tell you, there we go, where to put the plastic tube that will connect to the rocket launching apparatus when it gets there. Okay, so what I'm going to do, there's a flosser for flight, and then there's another one there. Then I'm just going to mark that, which is for the tube itself, and I'm just going to put a little L. And then another flosser, and then another thrust set. There we go. Okay, that's all we've got now. We've got a bunch of little marks around where they all are. Then what you can do, you can slide it a little bit further up. Get a ruler. Put the ruler alongside your rocket and make sure that the arrows, the points that you've marked, and the arrows are still in line and straight. One of the things it says on the instructions is to use a door for doing this. Why not? I mean, doors theoretically are hung straight, so you can put your tube on the floor next to a door and make sure all of this is lined up again. But we've got flosser, flosser, flosser. There's our L. Mark that with an L, and then flosser again. That's all four marks for each. Ta-da! Easy life, and then that bit can just go away. Finished with that bit now. But what we've got is we've got all of these marks around our tube now that are going to help us attach our fins. Now the way you want to attach the fins is that there's going to be, so there's clearance off the bottom, so don't whack them down there, because otherwise when it rests onto the launch pad and things like that, they're just going to get in the way. So put them a little bit up. I would suggest a couple of centimetres or a centimetre or so, so that the lowest part of the flight is actually clear of the bottom of the rocket. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to glue these, and think what I'm going to do with these ones, because that top marking, yeah, is so that I'm just going to put the top in line with that, with the top mark, and so we can do it that way, which that looks good to me. Oh, before we go on to that, I'm actually going to put a line about on that L. So before the stuff gets in the way, the flights, the fins or whatever get in the way, I'm just going to put a mark around about 4 inches up from the bottom. So 1, 2, 3, 10 centimeters for those that are New World. 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to draw a line just up there. Right. Reason for that, that's where our little plastic tube is going to go. But other than that, let's go and put our fins in place. Bit of Yoo-hoo. Doesn't really matter if you're going to use Yoo-hoo or super glue for this. It's more important that they are, if they're in place. If you've got people that are not necessarily wonderful dexterously, then or lining things up, then Yoo-hoo might be the better option, because at least it doesn't dry instantly, and you'll have a little bit of time to be able to reposition if necessary before the glue dries. But other than that, I mean, you can see from that, Yoo-hoo doesn't particularly take very long to go and set in and of itself. So you've still got to be fairly rapid, but at least if you do get it misaligned, then you have got the option to go and just move things around a bit till it actually lines up. Okay, one more, then we're done with this side of it. So this is where your teams come in, right? So one of your teams, or one member of your team in your group, could be sitting there assembling the rocket cartridge, the motor cartridge that we were just talking about, while another member of the team could be marking out and playing, cutting out fins and what have you, and then you know, everyone has got a job to do, and it works well from a bit of teamwork type of badge. So there we go. So that can go to the side for a second, and while that is drying, we'll get onto the subject of parachutes, if it'll stay where I'm trying to put it. Right, that'll do. Okay, parachutes. So let's go and tidy up all the glue. The parachute that you get, the instructions for the parachute come on the parachute itself. So this is what you get in the Klima kit, which is a bit of plastic with the instructions for the parachute on the thing. So from here, all you do is to cut the parachute out, pair of scissors, just cut it along the absolute edge there. And where you've got these holes here, you can either use scissors or your knife, or if you've got access to a hole punch where you can just punch those single holes rather than go through, is to go and punch those holes. And then once you've punched the holes, put a reinforcing ring on it. So when you've done that, cut it all out and so on, you end up with, now I've attached some of the strings here, but you'll end up with something like this. Okay, so you've got your holes punched and you've got your reinforcing hole tabs there. And then the idea is to tie bits of cotton to the to two of the things. So I've got one done on that side. There's also one done on this side here. So I've got that one done, and I've got this one done. Alright, those two. So that leaves just this side to do, and that is really sort of simple, if a little bit on the knacky side again. So really all it is overhand knots, and I really would suggest doing overhand knots in this case. What you need to do is to poke the bit of cotton through the hole, make it a little bit bigger to get that through. Poke the cotton through the hole. Like so, and then you want to just tie it off. It helps if you've got smaller fingers to do this bit, rather than my clodhoppers, but hey ho, we deal with what we were given. Alright, so it's just a knot. Oh. I mean, of all the bits that are difficult in the realms of making parachutes, who would have thought that tying knots in bits of cotton was the most difficult? But for me it is, so we will just deal with that as best we can. Have we got it this time? Potentially. Ooh. Oh yeah, and and to make sure it's secure, we'll do a double knot. So I'm just going to fiddle around again, hopefully not losing it, and hopefully not losing the plot at the same time. Boom, 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 boom. You go over there, you go over there, you go around there, you go through there, please go through there. There we go. Ha! Right, cool. Okay, so that's one there, and then we end up with another loop on the other side, done exactly the same way. And that will give us 3 loops on the parachute. So these bits of cotton here, these are the parachute cords by which the rocket will dangle from, well, sort of, when it's falling gently to earth after the parachute successfully deploying, and that sometimes actually happens that way, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the parachute doesn't deploy at all, and what you end up is the rocket coming down to earth with a bit more speed than is good for it. But yeah, it's all part of the experimentation, and we'll go through that and you know, some of the anticipation as to whether it's going to go through. Okay, so now you can see you've got a loop there, a loop there, and a loop there, right? So we've got 3 loops on our parachute. And now you can see why I did a bit of this earlier. What you do now, you have on the nose cone of the rocket, the purpose of this whole thing is for the rocket will go up in the air under the thrust of the motor, pushing against the O-ring, like we said. So the motor goes and thrust up like that, and then after the first stage of the motor has gone through, a little bit of delay, and then a second charge will go and go all the way up the tube and pop the nose cone off. So the nose cone is not glued in any way to the rocket, and it is to the nose cone that the parachute attaches, and the rocket attaches as well, but we'll come to the rocket attaching it first. This part of the procedure seems to confuse quite a few people. I don't know why. It's fairly straightforward to me, and I'm going to show you what we are actually doing with the rocket in a different way. So I've got a bit of string here, right? And what I want to do is to tie that bit of string around a pole, but I haven't really got access to any of the rest of the pole. So I've got this as a loop. Ignore my silly knot at the top. So we've got, say this is a continuous loop. In order to tie this around my thumb, say I can't get to the end of the thumb, then all I do is to reach through this loop, grab hold of that loop, pull the top loop through the bottom loop, and then just pull it until it wraps around my thumb like that. Okay? And that's exactly what we're going to be doing in order to attach the parachute to the nose cone. All right. So what we do is we gather together all of our cotton loops. So there's 1, there's 2, and then where's 3? There's 3. Right, all of our 3 cotton loops, making sure that they stay nice and neatly as a together like that, right? Like they're all not tangled up. This is what I kind of mean, right? So they're all sort of together, and the parachute itself isn't all scrunched up, and the loops themselves aren't crossing each other. We've just got them all sort of neatly stacked up here. Okay, And then with the top of our loop here, we're going to make a bit of a loop of loops, if you like. And that loop of loops we pass through, without twisting it again, we pass through the eyelet. So the rocket motor's got this little eyelet at the top here. So we're going to pass all of the loop of loops through that eyelet. Alright? And keeping the loop of loops still sort of together, so it's not, you know, getting all over the place on us or getting twisted or anything like that. And we can make sure that it's still together and hasn't got twisted as we got it passed through. Right? So once that's all sorted out like that, I've just got a big loop here that, in the same way that I passed the loop of the loop through in my example around my thumb, then I'm going to grab the parachute and pass the parachute through all 3 loops like that. And now when I pull the parachute and everything tight, then the loops gather up around the the edge of the thing. Might have to pull each bit of string tight on its own, but now we end up with, see that, all the loops going through, and we've got all of the strings of the parachute all nicely neat, so it will actually operate as a parachute as it's going to go down. Right, and I can't really undo it now, it's on, but you can see hopefully what I've actually done. If I open out those loops a bit more, you can see that all I've done is passed all the loops together from the edges of the parachute through that eyelet, pulled them all the way through, so I've got a big enough loop on the other side of the eyelet made from the 3 loops together, and then I pass the parachute through the 3 loops together, and then that sort of ties it onto the eyelet. That seems to be the bit that confuses people most, but it is doing exactly the same as I did here. So if you imagine that what we're doing, let's say this is the eyelet of the on the nose cone. We're passing the loops all together. So that's the loops all together, going through the eyelet of the parachute, and then we are getting the parachute, which, imagine the parachute is on the other end here. We're getting the parachute and then passing the parachute through the loop of loops on the other side of the eyelet, and then we are pulling everything tight, and so now we've got the parachute is now attached to the eyelet on the nose cone. Okay, I hope that sort of makes sense. If it doesn't, I'm not sure how else to illustrate it. Right. Okay, so we are now. Well, before we got that, hopefully our fins are more or less dry-ish. What I might do is actually put some more glue down them just to reinforce the connection. So if you're using white glue or Yoo-hoo, then you can actually just run a bead of glue down each side of the fins just to sort of get things going. But what I'm actually going to do now is I am going to connect this little white tube to the rocket motor at the end there. Alright, okay, and the reason why this is all connected out and lined up with the fins is that this loop here, if you imagine that the rocket launching things for these things is a big long metal spike that comes up, or metal bit of thick wire, and with a launch pad at the bottom of it that the rocket rests on. Right, this goes over that metal bit of wire, and when the rocket motor goes up, it acts as a guide to guide the rocket all the way up that metal spike. If you have this bit out of line, so it's like this, or say in line with one of the fins of your rocket, then what happens is the chances are that the fins will get torn off as the as the rocket reaches the top of your launch, or on its way up or whatever. So you want your launching thing to be clear of the fins. And the other thing you want it to do, you don't want it to be up here at the top end of your rocket, because if you have it at the top end of your rocket, then all that's going to happen is the rocket will go up about 2 inches a bit on the guide, the metal pole of the guide, and then we'll have nothing else to guide it anymore. So for a good amount of its launching thrust, before it's potentially got itself sorted out and is going up in a straight line, it now has nothing to force it to go up in a straight line, and it will probably just then lean over to one side or the other. If you have it too low, then it's just everything is just going to get in the way, and the rocket will just wobble around too much at the top. So you don't want it too central. The instructions state you want it about 4 inches up. I think it needs to be around about that. It doesn't really matter, but it needs to not be at the top and not be at the bottom. That's the goal. All right. So a little bit of Gorilla Glue just brushed onto where we're going to put the thing. It's a lot easier to do it on the body of the thing than it is to do it on the tube itself, for reasons of not getting your fingers in it. It does need to be straight, which is why you have you draw that line so that you can actually make sure that the thing is going through, because if it's not straight, then you're going to launch your rocket up at an angle, and the whole point of having the thing travel up a pole is lost. So it's got to be straight with your fuselage. So that's where we've got the 5th mark on the tube, and the line I drew earlier to go and line it up. Okay. Now, I wonder if they're going to decorate them, if they're going to start drawing on them to get there, with felt tips and what have you, to go and make things nice. And then all of these marks and things like that, you can just do in pencil, and then they'll soon get lost in the felt tips to come. It's just, I think that's a lot easier for everyone to see if I mark them out in pen. Right. Okay, so that's that done. The next bit is to attach the 2 pieces of shock cord together. So we've got the bit of Kevlar shock cord that's attached to our motor holder, and the boingy elastic bit of shock cord that we will eventually attach to our nose cone. Okay. Instructions say double overhand knot. My recommendation is that you use a sheet bend. I'm not going to teach you how to tie a sheet bend. You either know or you don't, and if you don't know, then I have a video. Oh, and I've got a video in the figure of 8 as well, so I can point you in the direction of those videos so you can learn how to do those knots. Reason why sheet bend is it's stronger than double overhand knot, it's stronger than a reef knot, and you do essentially have 2 bits of material, string, whatever, that are different diameters, and the whole purpose of a sheet bend is to tie bits of string that are of different thicknesses together. Alright, so once that's done, the next bit is to go and get your fuselage again and dangle all of this lot down through the bottom of your feed it in. Instructions again, the instructions say you attach all of this together at the start before you're building all of this, and before you're passing the Kevlar through this thing and all of this kind of stuff. I don't think that's necessary, and I think everything just ends up in the way if you do it like that. Alright, so what this needs to do is to fit neatly into the bottom of your rocket like that. Okay, so I am going to pull this out and apply some glue so that I can glue this into place. Again, I think unless you can do it really quickly, then Yoo-hoo is the best glue for this particular job, because you need to shove one thing up inside another, and if it suddenly locks itself solid while you're trying to do that, then you're not really going to get much further than that. Okay, so let's go and ease everything in, push it all together, get that bottom bit in. Come on, don't mess me around, please go, please go. Oh, it's messing around there a bit. And there we have perfectly illustrated why Yoo-hoo is probably the better option for this rather than using the super glue, because it's allowed me to reposition things. Okay, I recommend just a little bit poking out the bottom so that you can actually see where you're putting the motor, instead of having it entirely inside the body of your rocket, in which case you'll be going, what do I do here? Just a lot easier. And you got to remember the rocket is going to fit out at the end here as well. Okay, so that's all nicely in place. That is your motor housing in place, and at the other end we have now got, there's the Kevlar and there's the elastic, so all of that is coming out the top end of it. And so with the elastic side of it, we go back to our nose cone with our perfectly attached parachute to it. Here's our nose cone, and this bit of cord here goes through exactly that same bit of the same eyelet that the parachute goes through, and that will attach your motor to it. Now, what it says here again is use a double-handed knot. That's up to you. I am going to do a hitch and then another hitch so that it's all sort of locks in place. But the double-handed knot, and this particular part of it, the double-handed knot works just as well, because effectively you're doing the same thing as a hitch, which is you're producing one hitch in order to attach, and then the second hitch in order to lock your first hitch. And with the double-handed knot, double overhand knot, you're tying one knot to go and connect the knot, and then you're tying a second knot that goes and locks the first knot into place. All right, so that's all nice and tight there. That's not going to fall off anytime soon. And so there we kind of have it. There's our parachute, there's our nose cone, and there is our rocket. So that's it really. The kit does come with, it doesn't come with motors. You're going to have to buy motors separately. My advice is, depending on, is go for B motors if you've got a reasonably sized field. The letter of rocket motors determines how much thrust they provide, burn times, and all this kind of stuff. You can look at the stats for it, various things, and what they all provide. But the weight of these rockets isn't large enough to warrant anything big. So A, B or C. I would start with B if you've got a reasonable space to do it with. If you've got a small space to do with it, go with A. Alright, so they work perfectly well with all three of those. What you get in the kit is a bunch of wadding. The purpose of the wadding is in a similar sort of thing to a gun, right? So if you've ever seen cannon and gun, old guns and things work out, you start with the barrel of the gun, and then you then you pack it full of stuff, and what that does is it contains the explosion, or it contains the pressure that's created by the explosion, and therefore causes there's a bang, or the cannonball or whatever to go and fly at the thing. So without the wadding, you don't get any of that build up of pressure, and therefore your cannonball doesn't go anywhere. We use it in the same in rockets in a similar kind of way. So, like we said before, you've got the charge at the top of the motor. Once it gets to, your rocket has flown up under thrust and things like that, and it gets to the top of the things, and it's the charge at the top of the motor goes off. That's going to cause an explosion that's meant to push down the fuselage of the rocket to go and pop the pop the nose cone off, right? But that explosion needs to be good enough to be able to push out the parachute and the nose cone and everything sort of with it, right? So it can't be a wimpy. You don't want it so big so that it's going to blow the rocket apart, but it can't be a wimpy explosion. So in order to make that a properly contained pressure of the explosion from the top of the motor, it needs to have something to push against. So that's where we get the wadding from. The wadding that's provided with the kit is usually some straw type material. In practicality, you can use straw as long as it's dry. Don't shove wet grass down a cardboard tube. Or you can use toilet paper, tissue paper, anything like that. Just something to go and push down the tube. Now, although the instructions say, once you got to this point, you go and shove a load of wadding down your rocket motor. At this point, I would say don't, because the wadding you are going to have to replace after every time you launch the rocket. You're going to have to put some new wadding into it. So just from the completing of the rocket as a model ready to go, don't worry about the wadding until launch time, when you can get into the whole routine of the habit of launch, which is, push the wadding down into the fuselage of the rocket, parcel the parachute up on top of that, put the motor in the bottom, all of this. So rather than sort of preempt part of all of that process, just leave it as it is. So what you do for launch is that you'll push some wadding into here. You'll put the motor into there, then you'll neatly fold your well, when I say neatly, first off, make sure that it's not all tangled up and it's still sort of reasonably free of everything. So you've got the parachute, it's not tangled up in all the other bits of string and stuff you've got floating around. So keep all your other bits of string and everything else free from what's going on. Alright, so you put your wadding in, then go and feed your string down into your fuselage, alright, until you keep going down, keep going down, keep going down, keep going down. So now we're getting, remember this is all going on top of the wadding, so ready for launch is going on top of the wadding. Right, so when you get to sort of this kind of point, then you want to go and get your parachute, and just fold it up so it's like nice and neat. If you scrunch it up too much, then what's going to happen is that it won't come out, or it won't unfold when it comes through. But I found just folding it in like that means that it sort of wants to come apart a bit, right? So we're going to push more of that inside. Then we're going to insert the parachute. And that will drag more of the stuff with it. Alright, so the smaller rockets, like the SD's Educator Pack rockets, are really kind of small. You really only need like one bit of tissue paper just to go and put all this into play. Right, so you just make sure that all your bits and string are all neatly out of the way, and then just keep pushing stuff down until such time as everything is all sort of packed up packed up into the top of your rocket. There's my last bits of thread, and then eventually, right. So what you don't want to do is to jam any of this or catch any of this in alongside your nose cone, because the nose cone needs to be able to go and pop off freely when on launch. So if any of this is in the way or is causing the nose cone to stick in the tube, then your nose cone won't deploy and your parachute won't deploy, and you will end up with a rocket hurtling fairly rapidly to the ground, right? But there we go. So that's what we've got. That's fins are nicely set. Like I said, I'll probably going to run some beads of glue just on the insides of these things now, just to give them a bit of extra strength. But we have the fins on the end. We have our motor connection assembly there. We have the nose cone at the top, and inside here we've got shock cord and parachute and everything else inside the fuselage. And there is the bit that we slide the rocket down onto our launch system. Yeah, that's it. That is a Klima a Klima 10, or one of Klima 10 rocket. And yeah, once it's all assembled, then you can get the team to go and just make it look pretty. Felt tip pens perfectly well on these tubes, make it look nice and snazzy, ready for launch. Right, I hope that all made sense. I'll provide links and bits and pieces to where you can get hold of them, and some of the videos, not tutorials of some of the knots I've used on there, but it's a relatively straightforward process. There are some things like the actual step-by-step stuff to follow to get to this point is relatively straightforward, if a little bit knacky, and some of the instructions provided by Klima are not necessarily the best, and I think that's just largely due to the German to English translation that's going on. But yeah, hope that helps, and take care.